Hi, everyone. I have a special guest today, Nathan, and he is going to introduce himself and let you know a little bit about him before we do this show today for everyone. And I just want to welcome everyone. And I know it's been a while, but we're moving along in these crazy times. Nathan?
Well, my name is Nathan. Actually, my full name is Nathan Ciszek, and I have a YouTube channel called Haujean Contactee here on YouTube. No website yet. A 48-year-old MyLab. I've been abducted. I've been abused by ETs. I've been led down the primrose road, or the path. I've been thrown into the New Age nonsense. I've been in a satanic cult, which I'm not a Satanist. That's not me, but it was an Enki cult, uses Satanism as psychological camouflage. It's called the Joy of Satan. I've been making an effort to expose that cult. It's an Enki cult. It's a soul trap, much like the New Age movement is. And it's all kind of come about because in the very beginning, I didn't know that I was a MyLab. I wasn't even sure if I was abducted, which is how good they are at hiding it from you. And I thought that I was just one of these star seeds that is out there to talk about the Galactic Federation, make the world a better place, and do all this good stuff at Love and Light. When it turns out that what I found out is that the New Age movement, as well as that Enki cult that I was involved with, turned out to be something connected with military abductions and a MyLab program. I've had a hypnotic regression with James Rink from Super Soldier Talk. It didn't go as fruitful as I'd hoped, but it did expose one major thing about me, which is that my soul transference memory did not happen on another world. It wasn't something good. I wasn't being sent here in that memory to help humanity. I was actually in a hybrid container body, a super soldier whose soul was being fractured. And I was put into my mother at the 12th week after conception. And I found out through James Rink that this is something called Project Surrogate. There's not a lot of information on it. I think he's maybe one of the few people that is an expert on it, at least as much as you could be. And so I'm here to tell my story. And thank you for having me, Lotta. I really, really appreciate it. You're just a breath of fresh air, and you're not like most people in this community. I've struggled to get my story out for 14 years. I've contacted major researchers, podcasters. It wasn't until close to a year ago that one person gave me a chance, and that helped me actually get myself out of the situation. I was mind controlled, sexually abused. I've been made sick. I've had heart failure 2 times. I've never had a heart attack, thankfully. The first time was autonomic nervous system failure, which was induced by this military program. And then this spring, I got really sick again. They were trying to kill me and finish me off. But there is a happy ending to this, which hopefully we'll have time to get to, which has to do with separating myself from the silver cords that were connecting me to an alternate that they had at the White Sands underground facility, which is underneath the White Sands missile test range in the mountain range area. And that's where a lot of this stuff is coming from. It seems to be a hub for these types of, well, mainly, for the clone program, or actually one arm of it. I don't understand the whole thing, but I do know that they had a cloned alternate there that they were using to, to make me very sick. So I guess without further ado, and after I get a drink, I
Um,
guess we should talk about the soul transference memory first. Would you like to talk about something else, or?
no, actually, that's a good place to start. I just want you to spell the name of your YouTube so everyone knows how to find you, because Haujean is a very unique name.
Okay, well, it's Haujean and contactee. And after we get done, I'll send you the info so you can, put that underneath the video in the description. So
Great.
you guys can find me, because I don't have a website yet, but the only place you can really find me is my YouTube channel. And I have a Telegram group too. So if anybody wants to talk, I'm always there. I spend a lot of time there to answer people's questions, and I interact with everybody as much as I can.
Great.
I'm as open as I can be.
So I wanted to ask you before you go into the soul transference, was there anything unique about your birth that you know? Were there any circumstances that were never really um, that never really made sense, or are there elements of your upbringing also that you could see are hiding some of these deeper
Yeah,
connections?
absolutely. That's a great question. You're actually, I think, the first person who's asked me that, because you're involved in this yourself. One of the things that I noticed about myself was that I could remember all the way back to being an infant. I could remember being held, fed. I knew what foods I didn't like. Um, that's unusual in and of itself. The other unusual thing about it is that in these memories, a lot of them, I can remember actually having high level thoughts, to where actually remember being in, I guess it's one of those holders where you, um, it's not a crib. I forget what they call it. It's like a car seat. You can carry the baby. I used one with my son. So, but anyway, I was in one of them. I'm on the floor and I'm looking up at my mother screaming. And I realized I actually have a very clear memory thinking to myself, I can't talk. I'm not able to communicate. So I'm going to have to scream and fuss as much as I possibly can to get their attention, because they're not listening. That was one of the things. Throughout my life, when I was a kid, I had a lot of unusual experiences where I would sense a presence in the room, where I would sense a presence enter the room. I could also feel them circle me. It was like a directional sense. When I was a little kid, all the way up through my probably teenage years, whenever they'd enter the room, I would hear a loud, like a crack sound from the frame of the door. I got used to that. I actually started to like it, because I thought that something special was coming, to visit me. And it all kind of starts with this soul transference memory, which I thought was in a heavenly realm, because, that's what you're conditioned to think. And the memory itself was shrouded in a white haze. And the other interesting thing about it is that the individuals in the memory, there were three of them. It um, They had their faces shaded, and actually it was even more than just shading. It was actually rectangles that were over top of their eyes, little squares over their mouths in some cases, and sometimes, their face would be completely shaded, but you could see their hair and the rest of them. And in the soul transference memory, we were speaking telepathically, which also led me to believe that it was heaven. And that's where I kind of left it. And then now I've also had psychic experiences that have happened throughout my childhood, and throughout my early adulthood, and throughout my entire life. All of these built up in me, and to let me know more or less that I was different from other people. One of the things that I always wondered about was, why aren't other people psychic? Why, because I would hear about psychics growing up. I'd look into it. It seemed like they could never prove that they were psychic. And then of course, found out later that the ones who could prove it were actually classified and swept under the rug and not talked about, because that's not what they want you to know.
Hmm.
I know that The government fears people, developing psychic abilities, and ultimately, with Project Surrogate, apparently is a program. It's a joint ET program which is designed to kidnap psychic children. Most of these people, if not all, that would be kidnapped would have something that would be akin to an angelic soul, or something similar to that. And that's something that I found out about myself over the last couple of months. It's not something that I really feel totally comfortable talking about, because there's a lot of cliches attached to that, and it sounds very new agey in respect. But what I found out, what it really is that there are many extraterrestrial cultures that are deeply concerned and are in an effort to liberate humanity, and we incarnate our own people here. And when we do, the ones that pose a threat to the agenda that's happening here are the ones that get wrapped up in these types of programs and abducted, and then their souls are hijacked, they're fractured, they make alternate copies of you, and they can make hybrids and so forth. And then, so what Project Surrogate apparently is, it's not just a way to kidnap, hijack you, and then use you. It's also apparently like having a test tube version of you that they put into society as like a placeholder. So while your alternates are in these programs, they can have you in society. And what they generally do to keep you from waking up is they make you sick. They do a wide variety of things, and they mind control you. And in my case, I kept fighting to wake up. So the psychic events were kind of like pacifying me and attempting, to keep me under kind of a controlled narrative. And that's how I found myself in not actually wasn't the New Age first. I got involved with a satanic cult due to subconscious psychic programming and something I call subconscious psychic networking, which is where they subconsciously program you, and then they have other people that they program, and then they get them together to work in these little networks. And this is where I coined the term virtual temple complex, because the virtual temple complex that I was in, which was the Joy of Satan for about 7 months, literally turned my life upside down. And I met other people there just like me. One of them was a past life family member. And everybody that I followed as far as I could after that has had their lives destroyed, and their health as well. And it was happening beforehand, because that was one of the things that they do. They make your life a living hell. They make everything you try to do a failure. And then they program you to go into a cult like that promises to change everything. In fact, it's the exact opposite. And what that particular group is an inversion of the New Age movement. It's just another take on the same program. So get another drink
So
real quick, and then we'll get into it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
can you explain for everyone, just so that there's some detail about the Project Surrogate, how it's done, how they kidnap, how they take these angelics, because most of them are angelics, no doubt about it. That's what the government is hunting,
Right.
100%. So that people understand what the process is, and then maybe explain your experience of the soul transfer and
Okay.
the difference between the tube version that they put in society versus the other versions, and what the differences are, just so people have more detail about the
Okay.
entire process.
Excellent. Okay. What I know about myself is that I've been coming here for 1.7 million years. Um, I believe from what I understand, the human program goes back 1.9 million. If you go by carbon, uh, let's see, I think it's 1.6 to 2.4 million years old is what they've determined. And this is like, remnants from like, fire and, fire pits and spears and stuff like that. So I've been coming here for that amount of time. I know that about 1 million years ago, this is what, I mean, everybody's got a different story, a little bit slightly different information, but roughly from a vague sense, about 1 million years ago or whatever, I know there was a takeover of the human program, and it shifted into something that we've got now, which is basically a prison, more or less. with false religions and negative social engineering and basically soul slavery, soul harvesting, and so forth. So the angelics, more or less, would be those who would come here in an organized effort to incarnate here and fight the proxy war in the human container body versus engaging militarily because it's mutually assured destruction. So that's more or less why this is happening. That's more or less the story that you get from most of the people who've awakened to a certain extent in this community, and they'll all tell you about the same thing. I do know that I was hijacked, not this lifetime. The first time it was actually a previous lifetime. This is stuff that's come out since the hypnotic regression. I was born in 47. I was abducted around age 7, and then I was cloned, at which point my soul was hijacked. I don't have any direct cognitive recollection. I have an inner knowing of that. And since I've separated myself from their system by removing the silver cords, I've been able to interact with my higher self in a direct way and have a conversation. I can just literally blank my mind out and have my higher self speak to me and explain things. I've had things where I would look them up, things that I was told. And my higher self essentially is, I'm the avatar and I'm here to do something. So anyway, what I do remember is that when I was age 6, and then prior to that, I had some psychic experiences and things. My aunt had a haunted house, and I was very receptive to that energy that was in the attic. And so I had a kind of a rich life of psychic experiences. They were never something I could control. It was always obvious that somebody else was in control of it, and they would let me do a little bit, and then they would just completely stop it, and it just kept going on like that. So when I was age 6, I have this memory of being at the park down the street, from my house, and I was riding, and I just kind of a few months before that, I got a gift, for Christmas, and I rode the bike all the time. I still had training wheels on it, but I was able to get further and further from the house a little bit at a time. So the park was right at the end of my street. I only had to cross one little end street, to get there. So that was where I hung out a lot. And one particular day in the fall of 1980, I was riding my bike. It was getting close to probably about 4 o'clock. Sun was getting lower in the sky, and I wanted to go home to eat. It was time to go home. So I rode through the wooded path, and I came around the bend, and there was a rope swing area there. Some kids built a fort at one point, and it was a clearing surrounded by some trees next to the asphalt footpath that you rode to get back to the end of my street. At that point, being 6, I didn't want to interact with the older kids in the neighborhood because they like to pick on you, especially when you're young and you're by yourself. So I was a little bit anxious going through the path. I figured if I passed the swing and there were kids there, I would just ride straight through and not really give them much mind, because if I looked at them, they may mess with me. So, but as I got closer to the rope swing, I got a tremendous amount of anxiety and fear that wasn't normal. And as I came around the bend, I saw a group of people that looked like people, but they were a bit unusual because, at the time I didn't remember how many there were, but I recovered some of these fragments. There were 7. They were dressed in navy blue. They had hoodies on. They had navy blue pants. I don't remember what their shoes or footwear looked like, but everything was very uniform. And I noticed that they were wearing what looked like Halloween mask or ski mask or luchador wrestling mask, because they have very large almond-shaped eyes. I couldn't see the faces directly because I didn't want to look. But when I did glance a little bit, I saw what looked like a Halloween mask. I just saw it from the side. It was very, very white. It looked like chalk white, almost like that Scream mask from the Scream movies.
Mm.
It was a very almond-shaped eyes. The face was almond, were actually heart-shaped almonds. It just, like a gray but white skin. I didn't know what this was. I thought it was kids in the neighborhood, and like a ninja club wearing masks and wearing everything was exactly the same. The other thing was odd is they were exactly the same height. They were very thin, very wiry framed. I mean, it was very unusual. but you'd get 7 people that looked identical wearing the same exact outfits and wearing masks. And I thought that was just odd. So at this point I looked, and when I did, the one looked at me. I got like maybe half of their face. It looked like there was a mask over it because they had a white outline about a half-inch wide around the eye, but it was a big almond-shaped opening, and it was all black, and there wasn't anything there. When I saw that, at this point, I'm like full of anxiety. As soon as I looked at that, I got this shot of fear through my gut. It's the kind of fear that when somebody jumps out from behind a doorway and scares you, I mean, you get that jolt. It was that combined with the anxiety. But I also felt something at the moment that hit me. I felt something because at this point I was just past them. I looked at the point where I was directly next to them, about 15 feet away, and they were standing around a fallen tree. Behind that was a clearing. It's like a sandy area. I got hit in the back of the head by energy. It had like a viscous feel to it. It hit me. Oh, I gotta watch this microphone. It hit me right in the back of the head, and it flowed down my spine. At which point, I just remember, and this is the screen memory aspect of it, I pedaled as fast as I could until I lost my breath about halfway up the block, and I stopped, and then I kept going after that. And I didn't say anything about it. And years later, I'd ask kids about it. Actually, when I was growing up, I'd ask people that, I grew up with in the neighborhood who were older than me, whether or not they had ever had a blue ninja club. Like there was a group that would, pretend to be blue ninjas and wear these masks, and nobody would ever, nobody admitted to it because it never happened. But what really happened was, and this emerged a couple of months ago from fragmented memories, is that when I got hit in the back of the head, I came to a stop. I just put my arms to my side and I froze, at which point I floated off the bicycle and the bike floated with me. I remember floating upward into the tree canopy, but then it just faded out into like a lavender, like a sky blue color, but it was opaque. I felt extremely comfortable. I felt completely relaxed. At that point, I had no fear. Whatever it is had completely overtaken me. And then I lost consciousness, and that was it. The other piece of the fragmented memory is apparently afterward when I was being returned, because I came in from the same direction that I rode in the very beginning, but I floated in. And I remember seeing a group of the grays at this point, because now I could see their faces. They had the big large white heads, very, very narrow chins, and the big, large eyes. And they were standing in a circle, and it looked like, I call it the Stonehenge configuration, because they had their arms outstretched, and one was their hands were ever like this. And they were standing in a circle, and there was a light above them as if they were going to be levitated up into the craft that took me. There was no missing time. It just appeared that it was something of an overactive imagination. And that's what I put it away in my mind as. But I always had a bad feeling about it. I always wondered what it was. And it wasn't until recently that it actually came out. That was the abduction, where they took the clone of me that they were using at White Sands, because that was a complete copy of me. So that's that. Now, the soul transference memory, which is I've had since I was it's probably I consider it my youngest memory. It's as far back as I can look into my to my memory bank, really. And it came to me, I don't know where it surfaced, but it was always there. I forgot some of it, and in my late teens or so, I started to have flashbacks. It was like one piece after another. It was unusual because not just that, but now the fog was starting to fade. It wasn't a white room memory like I had looked at it. It didn't have that angelic or heavenly feel to it. It had more of a medical lab feel to it. It did not feel like heaven at this point. And the other interesting thing is that the flashbacks came in chronological order in the as the events in the memory, um, you know, transpired. I was actually getting a little piece of the time that fit right in, which showed me that somebody was putting these in me. So to get into that, what happened is I find myself in this room, in the original memory, which is what I'll start with. It's a very, very white haze. There's a machine of some kind next to me. There's a table, or actually a counter, or like a long kind of table that's mounted into the wall at the far end of the room. The left hand corner of the room, there's a computer terminal and a chair. There's a table to my right and something on it. There's objects. I can't make out what they are. There's three people in the room. They look to be Haujean extraterrestrials, which are the ETs that I began having contact with at the end of 2005. I had prior contact before that, but I never got a chance to see them. It was always a voice. It was always, like a vision of something. There was never any direct interaction, and I call it one-way contact. And then it became two-way contact. The Haujeans are close to 8 feet tall. They look Polynesian or Indian. They have vertical slit eyes, so they are basically tall, dark complected humans. Um, and That's pretty much it. With that, they have 5 fingers and so forth. They're like a Nordic species, but of a slightly different color, more or less. Um, Long legs, um, more or less. That's about it. But so I'm in this room. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Who are they in the echelon of the different um, beings that are here in alliance to try and help us? So where do they fit in?
They fit in on each of the sides because the ETs can change their body containers, so it's difficult to pin them down.
Mhm.
I do know, after a lot of information came out of me, is that yes, they were Haujeans, but these were Draco souls, and souls universal, but they're it's whoever you're actually whatever collective you're part of. That's really what you identify with. But so these were Draco souls using the Haujean container bodies because they were more appropriate for whatever work they were doing. The interesting thing in this memory is I was Haujean in this memory too. What I remember from that was that they were attempting to get me as close as my original form as possible to gain any advantage that that would give them. And that's why I was exactly the same height as them. Otherwise, they'd be towering over me. I'm 5'9". I don't know, and this wasn't me. Wasn't my physical container body that I have now that was in this memory. It was a different one. It was apparently uh, Haujean, but I don't know what I looked like. So, so anyway, I'm in this situation, and I'm very anxious. I'm not very happy with it because I know that they're going to put. At that time, I thought they were, from the frame of reference, from the context of it. I thought that I was actually, because there was a lot of lies that were told to me after this as I was trying to figure this out when I had contacts. I thought that they were putting my soul into a fetus, and this was going to be me. I was going to have. I was here for a mission, and this was my home planet. When in fact it was White Sands, New Mexico. There's a facility that's under the mountain range area of that missile test range. This is where a lot of this stuff takes place. So um, I'm anxious. I'm protesting a bit at this point because I know they're going to give me a speech impairment, and I'm thinking about all of the people that I knew that have been put into this situation. And the thing that I feared the worst was being put into this situation and not being able to see, them taking away my eyesight. Because apparently, I was aware of other people that they had done that to. And that's one way to suppress and kind of keep you under control. If you're blind, you're not going to be very active in the things that they're worried about that'll trigger your awakening, such as getting involved with this type of information. So I'm worried about that. The person at the terminal was a male. He was sitting down. He says to me, "Do you want to be white or black?" Um, and I said, "I prefer to be white because of the racial tension." And this told me another thing, that yeah, wherever I was, they were quite aware, and so was I, of the situation in the 1970s. And knowing that I was going into a challenging life experience, I wanted to reduce the amount of problems that I would have. So being white for me would be the ideal choice in that situation. I don't know if I would have chose something else because my skin was not white in that particular memory. Maybe I would have chose something else, but my attitude is that you know the container body is the clothing of the soul. So I made a joke that went flat in the room, and I simply said, besides, I like white skin anyway. Like I was, like I'd get some type of a rise or a response or humor, but the people in this room were all business and absolutely had no humor in them at all. And the next thing I know is I was complaining to them about, having to take some form of handicapped. And while I was waiting in suspense, because they seemed to, even though I was telepathic, they seemed to have a way to keep this information from me, so I didn't have it. What I refer to that is as a consciousness simulation, actually a localized consciousness simulation. Um, I could elaborate, but I'm not going to get too into that because I don't have a lot of time today. But they're able to prevent you, because what we're in right now is really a consciousness simulation. They can keep us limited to the five senses and keep information from us. They can keep us from remembering our past lives, and they can keep us from seeing them and knowing their agenda and knowing the agenda of each other and the government, which is ideally what they want. And so in this case, I wasn't sure, but I was protesting, and I remembered a friend who was apparently a close friend in this program, and he looked Haujean, and I didn't know what Haujeans were, so I thought maybe maybe he could be Asian, or Indian. I wasn't sure of this, but I saw him as he was at that very moment. I remote viewed him on Earth and was crystal clear. It wasn't like what you know we deal with now when we try to remote view. It's very, very difficult because the psychic signal's weak. Um, I saw him. It looked like, I thought it was maybe the streets of Chicago. It just had that big city feel. There was big skyscraper buildings around, and his mother was pushing him in a wheelchair up a sidewalk, and she had several, probably I think maybe 3 or 4 kids around her. And he looked like he had a condition similar to Stephen Hawking. He was very crippled up, very heavily disabled, and I know I didn't want to wind up like him, and I kept protesting. And that's when the female, who I later found out were what they called life engineers in this program, her name was Ciszek, and I had a lot of negative experiences with her over the course of my life. And she looked at me very sternly in my face, which I couldn't see her face because it was covered in these. She had these like a rectangle over top of her eyes, and I couldn't see. She said, "You have to take a handicap," very, very sternly, coldly, and just almost like an order. And at which point, I just kind of looked at the floor, and I remember thinking to myself, "I guess I'll figure it out when I get there." At which point, I was told to get into the machine. I got into it. Um, there's an enclosure. And now after I've had the hypnotic regression, I know exactly what this room looked like, and I'll describe it in a minute. But the machine, I guess I'll describe it now. The machine was white. It was very like a big plastic housing of some kind. Since I was 8 feet tall, this thing was probably about the same height as me, probably 7, 8 feet long. And then at least 5 or 6 feet wide. It had a place to lay on that was sticking out of the front of it, which was another 8, 9 feet long. And then it had this enclosure that was hinged that would come down over top of it. It was crystal clear, looked like maybe a polycarbonate or some other material, but it wasn't normal materials because I could tell, because in the hypnosis, it didn't have any fingerprints, no smudges, no dust. It was crystal clear. It was completely molded, and it comes down over top. What happened is that in the final portion of the memory, as I was laying in it, they were communicating with me telepathically, standing at my left. And the machine, well, actually, what I experienced I was just, the whole thing filled up full of white light. And I could see a fetus at the 12th week of conception. And I know this because this is one of these things that, where you have this memory, and then later on you have an important epiphany moment that comes later. When I took some nursing courses. I took anatomy and physiology, and my first day, when I opened my textbook up, the first day of class, I went straight to that section, and I looked up, and it was exactly what I saw at the 12th week. It was that stage of development. Later, I found out that this is through the ET contact, that they need to put a soul in that body before the 12th week of conception, because that's when the brain activity starts. If they wait, a soul is born simply by that particular act happening by, someone, um, excuse me, I'm getting thirsty. When you become conscious, that's when a soul is born. Um, so, in referring to the recycling system of souls, yes, they have to put you in there before that, or they increase the soul population. In this case, they had to put me in there at that point to
Can you
prevent your
explain
soul from being
increasing the soul population?
Yeah, the way I understand this, and this is from contact that I've had, is that one third of us are on this planet are star seeds. We come here from other worlds for a variety of reasons. We're kept here as prisoners. We're we come here to be social implants or social influencers. And what I call a positive planetary social engineering program, there's also a negative side of that, because there's two sides to this ET agenda. There's a positive and a negative. I don't know the details, and a lot of people seem to do, but a lot of those people also seem to be getting deceived. Actually, a lot of those people with the elaborate stories appear to be being deceived, especially the more detailed and elaborate it is. No, I'm completely happy with the vague sense of it for that reason, but and then the other two thirds are basically the fledgling race project that has been hijacked by these negative extraterrestrials and has been more or less turned into a soul slavery farm and God knows what else. Um, so I hope
So
that answers your
if
question.
if a soul comes in, and sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but sometimes there's like these questions that need to
No,
be
I want you to ask questions. It helps me out.
so if a soul doesn't go into the body until it's born, is that something that they don't like
I
because they
don't
can't
know.
control it?
I really don't know. I mean, if they can't control it, then therefore they don't like it.
Hmm.
So I just know what's happened to me.
Yeah.
I haven't done enough research on others
Hmm.
because it just, the amount of time it takes to do it. So there may be other things that they have done. And I think in that case, they would take the soul out that's already in and put you in or somebody else, whoever's going in. So I don't know much about that.
So if they have to put a soul in by the time it's 12 weeks old because they're afraid of consciousness, if they miss the mark of the 12 weeks, is it because they don't want that soul's consciousness to go into that body?
Well, what I understand is if they wait past that, it would either create a soul or they would put somebody in it. And there's because there's an AI system.
Hmm.
So just kind of using logic here without having a direct answer to your question, I would assume that the AI system would fill somebody in, would actually take somebody that they already have and put them in and completely, wipe their memory of the past life. So I don't really know too much about that. I just know what I've been through, and I pieced it together as best I could. I don't like using other people's info unless it resonates with me, but I prefer to really stick with my own
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
just use that because it just makes it easier, and it's also easier to tell people because you don't want to have somebody else's info when you're trying to explain your own.
Yeah.
It just gets too complicated to try to to say this is this and that's that. So so anyway, getting back where I was, yeah. So when I did the actual hypnosis session, there was a lot of information I couldn't get. I couldn't get anything about the actual abduction. Those fragments came to me afterward. Um, I had a lot of programming that I knew that I had to get rid of first, and it had to do with 15 years or so of being lied to by ETs, and I had a completely different preconceived idea of what my soul history was and why I was here. And yeah, I knew that my higher self was active in this. I was told going in just to it'll be fine. Just let it happen. And when I got out of it, I wondered why I couldn't get any more than that. And it was actually revealed inside the hypnosis session. It's because of the programming. I had to get rid of the programming first before I could handle the truth. And what I got was that, yeah, that wasn't home. That was White Sands, New Mexico. And that put me into a deep 2 month depression. The kind of depression where, there's days that you feel like you can't get out of bed and you don't want to because you don't want to, you just want to go back to sleep and not face it.
Mhm.
And so it's been really, really hard. And that was incredibly hard, because everything that I thought I knew about myself, because the mind control is so intense. I mean, they implant emotions in you, or they bring out emotions. And I went through a type of past life memory regression torture. It was more of an emotional memory regression torture. I had memory fragments, but the intense emotions that I had to deal with, not just the homesickness, the feeling of being trapped, but the mind control that they put me through, and the people that they brought me with. Actually, they brought me together with people that some I was lied to, and they were supposed to be past life friends or family. They weren't. They were just another victims in this. And there was somebody that was part of that past life family, and that caused me to have 5 years of post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, it was really, really horrible. It finally ended where they put something in me that blocked it. So I recovered from the post-traumatic stress disorder relatively quickly, within a matter of a few days. It took about a month, and I mean, I felt like I had a lobotomy. Literally, I had no emotional response, and then it slowly wore off. After about a month, I was kind of like, just like a feather, kind of falling to the ground. I just had a soft landing, and I was able to kind of move on with it and be tortured with other things. But that was horrible, because I would look at people that looked like they were Haujean, like Hispanic people, Indian people. It would trigger this stuff. I'd break down. I'd have to hide it from my wife. I mean, there was one time I was eating at a Mexican restaurant, and it hit me, and I had to go to the bathroom and lock myself in. It was a single-use bathroom, and I had to get it out, get myself together for 10 minutes before I could come back out. And luckily, nobody knocked on the door. And I've had plenty of experiences like that. Um, there's no way to live your life. So, but so yeah, the soul transference memory. I was in what I really got when I got the clear picture of it. I mean, it was a lab, but it looked like the furniture inside the lab was from the '70s, had that Formica look to it. The cabinets were that fake wood color with almost like a laminated type wood grain on it. It looked very dated, but inside that room was advanced technology that would make George, the guy that did the Star Wars movies, he would be pretty much drooling with his mouth open if he knew what that was, and if he could see it. I mean, it was very, very advanced. Anything that could fracture a soul and then transfer that fragment into like a human fetus at any stage for that matter. So yeah, that was it. Now, when I did the when I did the hypnotic regression, how I knew that this was the case is because James Rink used various techniques to try to trigger my subconscious to release something. One of them was that he had me look at myself when I was in the lab, and when I did, I saw light tactical armor on my body. Um, and it looked like some of the things you see in the Halo video game, which was copied from his work and others. And so that was the first clue. He had me get inside the machine. When I did, I could see. That's how I know the lid was clear. I was looking out of it. But when I looked at my feet, I had those little hospital footies on. I had a gown on. I wasn't wearing the tactical armor anymore. So there was a piece of that memory was taken when I got it dressed, before I got into that machine. Um, and then, of course, when your subconscious is releasing information that's not actually part of the memory, but it's a clue. I can't really say that I had the light armor on at the time I was standing there. I may have been in a hospital gown. I don't know. And I probably was, because I got right into it. I may have already came in that room and had that on, and then got out of it and put the gown on. So it was that. And then, yeah, the other thing is how I knew it, how I knew what it was, is when he said, okay, I want you to step out of that room and go back into this hallway that I had to visualize. It was a hallway that had a bunch of offices where every time I'd go through the door, that was to try to unlock a new memory, or to look. And it was like a way of triggering the subconscious to give you something, more or less. So when I stepped out of that room that I was in with the lab, I stepped into a military base. And it was the same military base that I've had dreams for about 20 years in my early adulthood and my childhood as well, probably close to my late 20s is when I think it actually stopped, because there was a couple years later, that's when this other contact started with the satanic cult, Enki cult thing. But I'd have these repetitive dreams of being in this underground uh, facility, and it was a military base. I had the sense that there was extraterrestrials there. In the dreams, it would always start the same way. I would find an underground entrance, either in a cavern that I was exploring, or I would go to a metal building and go down an elevator or stairs. Just things like that. I would just, one time I went down in the subway and found a door, and bam, I was right back into this facility. And one interesting dream was I was exploring a cavern, and the cavern was in the middle, looked like the Southwest, looked like Utah. The entrance was under a big rock. It was a stomach crawl. We went into this cavern passage. I went in with other people, but they weren't with me when I got in it. And I walked to the end of this, like a hallway. It was all, it was a trunk passage of a cave, and at the end of it was a metal door, a clean looking painted metal door with a security camera. And I went in it, and the weirdest thing was is that while I was in this space, nobody bothered me. I could walk anywhere I wanted to. I had free reign of the place. In the dreams, I even climbed up in the ceiling. There was a couple of spots where the ceiling was low enough where I could jump up and grab the metal framework and pull myself in it. And I'd sit there and watch people. This is the way the dream would work. I'd walk around the base and nobody would bother me. There was one particular one I remember that was weird because it was just strange. I walked past a room and it looked like it had liquid air in it. And it looked like maybe there was some kind of energy field that was separating the atmosphere from the hallway to the room itself. And it was a lab and there was people in there. There was a screen on the wall, and on the right-hand side, it looked like a lab table, like one of those long ones you find in like a high school or, lab. And I just had a weird, I mean, it was just very, very strange. And I never really thought much of it, but I always enjoyed the dreams because they were repetitive and they were lucid. And what I believe they were fragments that were implanted in me in a dreamscape. They were fragments of actual memories. You would think that they'd want to keep me completely ignorant of this if they didn't want me waking up. But what I learned was that they were trying to pacify my urge to wake up by giving me this stuff. If they could derail or give me something that would hijack me and my effort to wake up and actually give me a false reality to live in, such as the starseed stuff with with the new age and all the love and light, that would be something that would be very, very useful. Well, they tried that, and but they tried the satanic cult stuff. Within 7 months, I figured out that was a complete ruse. That we were getting attacked by angels, and we were communicating with pagan gods. And I realized that the angels and the pagan gods are all on the same side, and somehow I didn't know the AI was involved at that point, but I knew they were able to pull off these elaborate mindscape or astral experiences with all of us. And they were able to create a completely simulated world of some kind for us to interact with real people that seemed real, that would be in these experiences. And it took me a long time to realize, but it's transdimensional AI that connects with the collective consciousness and is able to create these types of scenarios and experiences to completely deceive us. And I can see you're shaking your head. So obviously, you know all about this stuff thy, which is why I'm here. So,
Yep.
can you share something? Because I'm really dying to hear something.
Um,
Throw me a scrap.
Ask me a specific question.
Okay. Have you had these odd type of AI astral experiences? Is there anything
A lot of well, to the surprise of many, and this may be, I don't know, disturbing, I'm not sure, but when I was 8, Metatron came. And Metatron is AI. There is, if you want to call it biological, on a different density merged with AI.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you know, they can simulate whatever reality. And by that, I mean the beings that interact with you, they can simulate any theater to try and convince you of that reality,
Right.
to try and get you to do whatever they want. So I had techniques when I was young to figure out when it was a simulator.
Mm.
And that is what helped me because you can't distinguish it and your brain can't distinguish it. It doesn't know the
Right.
difference.
Right. Your soul has to distinguish
Right.
it.
So there's, I mean, they know that neurally there is no difference. The same in real dream. Your experiences in real dream and what this 3D theater is, it's indistinguishable.
Right. It's all just, it's all the product of I would say like a universal consciousness that we're all part of. We're like
Right. We're in a
nerds,
motherboard, if you will.
in a
Right?
sense, but more or less an organic, energetic one, not
Yeah.
the computer simulation that they're trying to push on us, which,
Which they
really,
hope to change into a fully artificial one.
yes, yes,
Um,
right.
but yeah, this is also the reason why they love accessing people through real dream,
Hmm.
because they map you out. When they map you out, they have access to your stargates, your portals on all those dimensions and all those levels. So you're living a multi-dimensional existence interdimensionally.
Right. Yeah. For example, I know that a lot of my lifetimes here have been as a soul fragment where my higher self remains in her container body. My higher self is mostly female, but has a male persona too. But I think it was 93% female for my entire existence and 7% male.
Mm.
So, but yeah, I most of these experiences here on Earth has been as a soul fragment, and not as a full-fledged incarnate. This was the exception of this.
Mhm.
I know that I was put here to do something, and I wasn't able to do it the first time. And I know that in the 40s, President Eisenhower signed treaties with these ETs. I know that this whole program had been going on for a very long time, but they signed these treaties, and certain countries are under different ones, but very similar. I don't understand it totally, but I do know that the one that in involves, people from Canada and people from Australia and others, and of course the United States, and that essentially what they're doing is they're stopping us coming in to hijack us, especially those who come in whole, I guess you could say. And that's why, my higher self had been pretty much in a state of, I don't know if a state of suspended animation or just a state of being in prison, but was able to get through to me over a long period of time with the help of three ETs. Let's see, two of which were family members that came through. I have a lot of love for them. The third person was named Orban. It was two Haujeans and another Ashtari was another extraterrestrial that looks what you would consider looks like a tall Nordic more or less, but has suntan skin and like white blonde hair, like just really really light. That's a past life husband. And there's quite a few times. I mean, it pretty much happens every week. I break down about this. I miss these people. Um, and they came through to help me, and I had some people that came through to help me as well. I had a mentor from Project Avalon that stepped up, and I'm really thankful to these people who don't charge money, because those who do, they limit their ability to help people who can't pay because they've been put through the types of things that I've been put through, the inability to work, being disabled. I've had 7 spine surgeries. I've had 7 sinus surgeries. I've lost half my sense of smell. I had the heart problems. I've got nerve damage. I've got scar tissue to the point where, I mean, it doesn't take much for me to throw out my back or to hurt. It's hard to work. It's hard to do a lot of things. And then with the speech impairment that I've had to deal with, which mostly cleared up because they put me through a situation where they wanted me to be a new age influencer, but their idea was not to let me do it, was to sabotage it. It was essentially punishment, but also they knew that They knew what my higher self was trying to do, that I had to do this to wake up. I had to find people to help me.
Mhm.
So they did everything that they could to sabotage that.
Mhm.
And then I would, people would ask me like, why aren't you doing videos? And it's like, you just don't understand.
Mhm.
Um, so they put me through this long period where they fixed my speech impairment about 90%. I still have little issues, but a lot of times when I do these interviews, they'll put attachments on me. And I've been lax in my energy work and the things that I'm supposed to be doing. I started to pick up the pace with that. That's why I'm not having problems right now. But the last two interviews were horrendous. I mean, I had to work 10 times harder to talk and to think.
Mhm.
Um, and they affect your endocrine system. I've had them shut down my testicles. I've had to go on TRT. They've done that to other friends that I know. People I met, my mentor in Avalon, they did that to him. It made me incredibly sick. It's more than just losing your sex drive. You lose your drive, and you get sick. Um, that was something that they did starting my early 30s. Not long after my son was born, they really started to mess with me, and my health went completely downhill from there. And nobody would understand me. I mean, they looked at me like it was my fault that I was lazy and there was something wrong with me, and I was a hypochondriac because I was constantly sick. And nobody understands. I mean, they just don't go through this. They think it's a personal issue with you and your personality.
So is this the handicap you chose, or is that
I
something?
didn't choose one. No, they gave me the speech impairment, but that's all they told me. That's all they said to me. What I found out is that as I began to continuously wake up, they made my life worse and I got sicker because of it. That was their way of stopping me. Um, when it didn't work and I started to persevere and push, what happened and people started to come in, which they didn't want. Even they put me into this cult that was supposed to derail me and send me off into a different direction, so I didn't wake up. I'd be trapped in that. Like I know somebody that just literally cannot get out of the programming of it. He's to the point now where he literally agrees with the Draco agenda. He thinks humanity should be completely wiped from the face of the earth because he sees us as a prison, and the only way to end the prison is to kill everybody. And when you get to that point and you're that bad off and you're under their thumb, I mean, it's kind of hopeless. They've got you. He thinks they're going to set him free. He thinks that there's this resistance of souls that are out there. They're breaking people out of the prison. Yeah, that's not people he's talking to. He's talking to the prison wardens. I mean, I could talk about what they had him do, but I think it would probably create more legal problems for him because, it's just they use people to do things. You know, Cryptocurrency is something that's used to fund terrorism, and they do use my labs to generate revenue for terrorist organizations. I'll put it that way. And these people are mind controlled, and I would suspect that some of them are actually it's under a religious context. The things that the ETs are capable of actually doing would blow your mind if most people knew the full scope of it. I don't know the full scope. I know the extremes. I know what they can do. I just don't know everything that's happened. It's impossible to do that. But what I've been exposed to is a great eye opener, and it literally proves to me that this is a completely engineered reality. It's a manipulated world. It's been terraformed. We're under a planetary and AI transdimensional planetary consciousness simulation that limits us to five senses so that they can play God with us at various nested levels of consciousness. From individual consciousness simulations, such as which you see as residual hauntings, to complete just seamless types of realities that you can be trapped in when you die because you're not fit for recycling at that point.
Mhm.
Um,
Go into the residual hauntings. I'm sure people want to know your take on
Well,
that.
residual hauntings is when you see something play out in the environment. It looks like it's just a recording, like a
Mhm.
traumatic event.
Mhm.
Uh, or, there's a haunted house. You read about it years ago. There was this woman in white that would go into the garden every night and people would see her.
Mhm.
She wasn't aware of anybody around her. So they think this is just something that's replaying on the environment. There may be situations like that. I don't know, but I do know that they do put people in a consciousness simulation, either by themselves or with a group of people, and they're pretty much trapped. So they're doing something. So they're seeing reality as it used to be. They may be in the house that they used to be in, but it's It's just as they knew it to be, yet it's now completely torn down and they're stuck.
Mhm.
So I know that that's taking place. And it's just when you start to have these experiences and you interact with these individuals that are stuck in these situations. I mean, I had one that I stayed in a house that a guy accidentally was had his they were taking this drug, and they were actually lacing it on like herbs and then selling it at these hippie festivals, and they got really wasted on this stuff. And the one guy thought that the other person was a monster, pulled out a shotgun and pointed it at him, and he grabbed the barrel and pulled it towards his forehead and says, "You're not going to shoot me, bro." And when he did, he pulled it, it set the gun off. It blew his brains out all over uh, the room, to the point where I stayed there. There was literally a pin of an evidence tag on the ceiling where there was a piece of the guy's skull still stuck into the ceiling. And yeah, I had an interaction with that person. I felt him enter the room. Nobody told me the house was haunted until after I brought it up, and they're, oh yeah. And I sympathized with him. I had a telepathic interaction. It wasn't verbal. I spoke to him, but I could feel his pain. I knew what he was thinking, why he was there. I knew his life ended so abruptly that it just he was still in shock. And then when I tried to sleep, he kept waking me up because I could feel him laying on top of me. And so I finally told him, "Hey, I got to get up and drive 4 hours to go home. Can you please leave me alone?" That's when he did. So I'm not afraid of these things, but the fact that people can be trapped like that is absolutely cruel. It's another form of hell, just
Mhm.
like they're creating here. And the physical reality here that they've created and they've limited severely. They cut us off from source, and they give us false religions to hate one another over. It's absolutely barbaric what's going on here.
Yeah.
So anyway, over the course of my life, I've had these experiences and I've woken up to the point where I became a threat. They started back in 2019. I was to the point where I thought I was going to die. I had autonomic nervous system failure, and I thought to myself, I still had a speech impairment. I wasn't willing to go public and talk to anybody, but I did want to contact researchers, and I've been doing it since 2008. I had no responses. Um, Finally, I contacted Rex Bear of the Leap Project, and I've got a video on my YouTube channel where Rex literally gets an implanted dreamscape, and after that, he wouldn't talk to me ever again. Um, I believe Rex has got some programming there and is also part of these programs, but yet, you try to get through to people like that because you're concerned and you think they need to know something. You're knocking on a door that's not going to get answered because they're too afraid to face it. So when he got a taste of what I was dealing with, he had to get away from it. And I contacted him and I just explained my whole story. I wrote him probably 25 emails. They were manipulating the situation and lying to me and telling me that Rex and I were going to be doing like a David Wilcock, Corey Good type project. And they were going to orchestrate all this and put it together. And of course, that just made it even worse because then I sounded crazy. At which point, I realized what they were doing and I apologized to him. And just when he finally responded, he says, "Oh, shucks, no, don't worry about it. Thanks for the information." But he would not talk to me after that. Um, and he did a video about the implanted dreamscape. He brought Elizabeth April in, who's also a controlled MyLab victim, who unbeknown to her, that's what the story is. She told him that he had a choice to make, and that they did it to elicit fear in him, and he could decide whether or not I'm a bad person or a good person. It's up to him, and that's where the message ended on a live podcast that he did with her. 2 weeks later, I think, or a week later, I was told to go on her psychic group chat, pay her $55, and or I think it was 75, I think, and ask her two questions. And I asked her about Egypt because it's what I was told to ask about. She recounted an actual lifetime that I had that ended very, very fairly violently. I was a slave, and I was there when they were constructing the Menkaure pyramid, and I was in my early 40s, and which is pretty much you're overdue to die at that point anyway. And I got the idea that I'd steal the levitation device we were using to move the stones and give it to the villagers. So I stole it and hid it. And I got caught and I was executed for it. They poisoned me in a cell. She thought I was sacrificed. Now I was tortured by reptilians and kept in a cell and then fed poison. And that's what happened to me. Now, this was a device that you hold in your hand. It interfaces with your consciousness. My job was to stand there, and as the stones would come levitating in like long rows, because they had these like almost like you call them cell towers, but they were levitation, devices, and they put these towers every so many miles, and they would levitate these stones that would come, from the quarry completely cut, and they would show up in sequences, and then you would, what I had to do, I had a device that would actually move the stones, either several at a time or one at a time. It would interface with my consciousness. The workers would put their hands on the stones and they would kind of move them along and put them into their place. So it was pretty much you could just push this giant stone anywhere you wanted to, and it would levitate a little bit off the ground. And over top of it, was a black box that would float above it, or and that was the levitation device. But the handheld controller is what interface your consciousness to make that work. Um, and so that lifetime didn't end well. The other thing I asked was about my project. If she was dealing with positive ET, she would have told me that you're dealing with Dracos and Orion ETs. And there's also other ETs involved in that too. It's not just them. There's other assisting races that are in on this conspiracy against humanity. And I was given a bunch of BS, like you some of it was true. You've always been sent here to be either a martyr or some sort of agent of change where you sacrifice yourself over and over again. And that's really what you're about, Nathan, is what she said. It rang true because that's really been my attitude across my entire life. Now, one of the things you asked me in the beginning about, is there any kind of residual things that are part of these programs? Well, I have a very strong infatuation for firearms and explosives. That's very unusual. I mean, not so much for firearms, but explosives. So when I was a kid, I was 14, I was building bombs. I blew up mailboxes and left poems and stuff for the police, and because they ruined our fireworks show. I was a troubled kid, so I had 26 felonies and a misdemeanor. It's at 15. Um, so that was one of the things. And oddly, of course, because you're in these programs, they manipulate people. I did 25 days and, juvenile detention. They gave me probation, and essentially that was it. I mean, I got a slap on the wrist for it. Had a big pot bust when I was 1995. I was just like 21. Um, the police apparently had tremendous resistance because they screwed up every aspect of it. I wound up getting no criminal record and another slap on my wrist. I've been pulled over by the police with contraband in the car and illegal firearms. I've had the cops take me out, half buzzed up on beer, put me back in the car and say, "Have a nice day. Here's a warning." That's the type of things that I've been through. And I could sense, I thought God was helping me and whatever else. I knew somebody was there, but it wasn't the people that I thought it was. Um, then, later in my life, I got myself straightened out, and I went on kind of pretty much a personality, uh, kind of like a reparative phase of my life where I was able to get this out of my system. And so I'm not like that anymore. I was violent when I was a child. I had fights and things like that. I mean, these weren't normal fights. I mean, when you go up behind another child in sixth grade, and you take a fifth grader and you push their face into the steel part of a urinal where you have the valve, and it splits their lip and nearly knocks their teeth out. I mean, it's just, these were violent street fight type techniques that popped out of me. And they didn't know where it was coming from, and neither did I. And I look back at it as a parent. I find it rather horrifying that I was that I was capable of actually doing something like that unless I was fighting for my life.
Mhm, mhm.
And so these are the types of things that I had to deal with back then. I also had a personality disorder that really, really limited my emotional span for a long time. And I put every bit of effort that I could to to improving myself. And when I went up getting when I had all the spine surgeries and all those abnormal problems that started around, it actually started in second grade. I started having problems with my spine,
Mhm.
and which was unusual as well. And I used the pain and the suffering that I went through in a positive way. It opened my emotional span up and made me realize that we have to love one another, and we have to take care of each other. And I watched people turn their back on me, and and it was weird because even my own parents and my wife's parents, their whole family, both two families intervened and said, "You need to leave, Nathan, because he's not going to be able to support you anymore." When you have something like that, and you see the ugliness of people in society, and I realized that somebody was manipulating my life, and in a very negative way, and destroying everything that they possibly could. When I was in second grade, I remember going up to it was field fun day, and it was like last day of school, and there was a raffle, and I had 10 cents left over from lunch. I bought a raffle ticket, and on the way up to the table, I was thinking to myself, I've never won anything. It's as if there's a spiritual force keeping me from winning. Just things that other kids would take for granted. I don't get. Um, and a voice said they won't sort the tickets, and they didn't. I threw my ticket in. She gave me the ticket. She ripped it in half. She threw it in, and it was a big trash bin of all these tickets, and they didn't sort them. They didn't mix them, so they picked right off the top. And I happened to win something that day. I won a soccer ball that I traded for an inflatable rooster because there was a jock kid and it wasn't into sports. So I got the rooster and he got the ball, and everybody was happy. But that was just one of the examples of things that I had to deal with, that I knew I was different, that there was something in me that was really vastly different that I didn't understand. So anyway, going back to what I was saying about Rex, at that point, I was told after that happened, because now there was proof that they did it to set up Rex to where I would have proof of what was happening to me, which was not the case. But and I was told that they were going to make me well, which they did. They stopped the autonomic nervous system failure that they gave me. They started to work on my speech impairment, because I said, I'm not going to be able to talk unless you fix that. And they said, we'll fix it. But instead of fixing it, they put me through these horrendous procedures where I would feel like like I ate an entire sheet of LSD. By the time I got done, I would have like just intense headaches, mind fog, memory loss. This went on for about 2 years, and my speech improved despite that, because they were whatever they were doing, some type of neural rewiring type procedure. They were doing it in a destructive way. So my speech did improve to the point where I could talk. Then I started to go out and do videos, and that's when they started to make me sick and attack me. But it wasn't really until I went into Project Avalon, and somebody came to help me. There's a guy I've been talking to for about a year now, and he's very well versed in this. He's part of a group that removes the etheric implants from each other. And these people are being attacked by directed energy. They're being made sick, just like I was. And he helped me see through this by doing counseling sessions, sometimes 5 to 7 hours at a time. We'd sit and talk on Zoom, and he would sense things that I needed to remember, and then he would try to coerce it out of me and kind of lead me along and nurture me until I would put two and two together. Eventually, we got to the point where he told me that I was being messed with by Draco ETs, because he took a look. He saw some Greys and some Dracos in a lab that felt very military, but he didn't say that. He just said it was a lab, and I said, "Oh, a soul transfer lab." And I said, "No, I think you're mistaken. Because there's some good Dracos and there's some good Greys, and Elizabeth April's a Zeta, and she's friends with Greys, and it's just like the whole programming was still there." So he spent more time with me. But what really started to really get things going is I was finally given the opportunity to go on a podcast after being in order for 14 years. And that was Robert, a Typical Skeptic podcast, gave me the time of day. That's when the shit hit the fan, because That's when my friend told me that he had been attacked by Dracos accompanied by super soldiers in psychic attacks. And I was really intrigued by that. And it resonated with me. And I wanted to talk about it. So I did when I started doing the podcast on that and talking about that, that's when things got ugly. That's when they gave me another round of heart failure. Um, I got really, really sick and they were messing with my hormones. They literally dropped my testosterone to 146. Um, and I got really, really sick from that. And that was the level from the lab report. And so yeah, then the psychic attacks started to ramp up. They were putting me through pain where I could barely walk up and down the steps. That led to and during this time, I had a wonderful woman come into my life. Um, Not a significant other in relationship, but a very good friend of mine. She's from Australia. We did a few podcasts together. She's psychically inclined, and she does what you call meta healing. So and she did, fortune telling, but she was different because it wasn't just a tarot card reading, it was a psychic reading. I don't know why the cards were even involved, but for some reason the cards would always kind of match what she was saying. It was weird, and I never really got it. I was very skeptical about that. She kind of, she showed me there's something more to it than what you would think, because I thought it was psychic front loading. You look at the cards, now you got to mold what you're going to say to the cards. Something was different with that. Um, so anyway, she helped me as well. Things really got going when I said, "Hey," I said, "I'm getting attacked. My ankle is so bad. They put an attachment on it." I saw them put it on it, but what I was seeing wasn't really what they were doing. Um, I was getting threatened. I was constantly had constant psychic harassment. I had entities in my head telling me they were going to kill me, stop what I'm doing. It was just relentless to the point where and I had people that I was talking to that seemed like they were regular people, not ETs, and I think some of them were super soldiers in this program. Now when when I look back at it, but what happened I said, "Can you do something with my ankle? I cannot deal. It was 3 months now. I've been in hurt." And it's been swollen for 3 months, and it's gotten to the point, if I was working at the time, I wouldn't be able to work unless it was a job that I sat at a desk, and even that was incredibly painful because I could barely put my foot on the floor without having pretty severe pain. She took a look at it, and what she found was, she goes, "Oh my God," she says, "I see you in a military building with Dracos around you. You're on a table, and you're naked on a table. They've got a needle device that's sticking into your ankle, and they're pumping some kind of fluid into it through a hose." And she said, "I'm going to try to do something. I don't know. I've never seen this before." And then it felt better. And she goes, "I looked, and because I got back with her, she goes, 'Please let me know if this works.'" I got back with her and I said, "It seems like it's maybe half as bad." And she looked and said, "I think they've taken the needles out." Um, Then within, I don't know if it was hours or within the next day, because it's still on my cell phone. I've got all this recorded. In fact, I think I sent you that video.
Mm.
So you heard what she was going through. She had these psychic downloads, and she was seeing all this stuff and flipping out and sending me voicemail messages. She saw me in this lab. She saw all that. She saw that there was a an awakening taking place that she didn't believe. I mean, she didn't. She acknowledged it, but it really hit home with her. She didn't really understand it until that point, that there was actually technology that was suppressing our consciousness, and that signal, that resonant frequency, was being reduced and causing an awakening across the planet, and that there was an effort to stop that. And she saw that, because one of the things that I was told her, when we first got together and started talking, this is what I was actually told before, and she tried to deprogram me thinking this was part of it. I was told that that I had been sent here to attack super soldiers and underground military bases. That's what I was told. And she goes, "Nathan, that sounds absurd." And it does. And I said, "Okay, it's probably something they've lied to me about."
Mm.
So that went on, and that was part of it. But what it turns out, that was actually, from what I understand, to be true. And she saw this military program. She saw how they people come in here as agents of change, and she saw me in Egypt and things that I did. she saw my abduction, pieces of it. And what she saw is they put this wand in my forehead and were able to extract a bunch of information. After I was abducted when I was 6, that's a story I just talked about. And she had referred to this guy, Michael Lee Hill, who had described something like that done to him as well in an interview he did with Rex Bear. But he was conscious during that one. It was a bit different, but it was the same technology. So she saw all of this when she's telling me this. She's like, "Oh my God," she goes, "Far out, Nate." She must have said far out probably a dozen times. And she described how they're using social media to essentially promote people pushing the New Age movement and these other types of soul trap deceptions. And so she got an education within probably an hour of the whole thing. Then she got attacked, and some of that memory was taken from her. We still have to do a podcast. It's going to happen soon, but it hasn't happened yet. And there's been a lot of attacks and interference with her because things really got bad for her. After this happened, that's when they really turned their eyes on her and said, "We're going to get even with her as well." But this led to me waking up, and she's like, I was told, because she was interacting with what she calls the Holy Spirit. She said, "I was told that you're not going to accept this, and you're going to have a lot of difficulty with it, and that so I don't know if you're going to believe any of this." And I did, and I was like, "Please help me." And so there's not much that she knew what to do, but that's when I started to get a bit of information from my higher self for the first time. Because when she did the spread of the cards, there was a female higher self. There was a card representing a female, like the higher self, and then there was this hierarchy that was oppressing me. And then at the end, it showed that I broke free. I started to get these images of these silver cords, and I'd never heard of anything like that before. And I remembered what she said because it was just like echoing in my head: "Turn to God." And that's what I felt that I had to do. So I knew that there would be source energy that I'd have to use to do this. So I started to do this. That the night that I did it, I was able to burn a couple of these cords off, channeling source energy. Before this, nothing worked. I couldn't do anything. Immediately the next day, I was on my way to the cardiologist office for a doctor's appointment. It was the first visit to get tested for the heart failure. On the way into the parking lot, I get contacted by this Draco that talked like a negotiator. He was very smooth, very calm, but very, very evil at the same time. And he was telling me that, we can make things. He said, "Let's work something out." He goes, "You don't have to do this. I don't want you to break away. I don't want you to continue to do what you're doing, but I can make your life a lot better if you work for us." And I was just like, "Okay, well, what do you have?" And I'm like, "Well, first, let me get to this doctor's appointment." I'm pulling up to the office at this point. And I go through the test. The doctor was very refreshing. This is the second doctor. The first one refused to treat me. Just flat out told me, he lied to me. He didn't accept any of my symptoms. He belittled them, even the weight fluctuations from, absorb. I mean, I would literally retain 9 pounds of water and then actually, lose it. I would gain 9 pounds and lose it in a week. And he said, "Oh, your scales broke." So I had to get another doctor. Well, on my way out of the office, following the doctor, this entity starts talking to me and telling me, "Look, Nate, things are already going better. You can see how your doctor's acting. I can make the rest of your life better. I can give you 20 years of good health despite what you've been through. You just have to work for us." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Who else works for you?" And I started naming names. And then I said, "I guess they don't know what they're really dealing with, do they?" "Oh, no, we don't tell them who we are and and what they're really dealing with." But so I named another name of somebody and that I had heard that has been very prominent in the UFO community that is suspected of having some shady dealings. And no, and I was told that, well, he actually knows what we are and what we're doing, and he's on with the agenda. And I said, "Look, and one of the things he said to me in regard to caring about humanity was he says, "I think you're a good person, but I think you're misguided," is what he said. I mean, this was a total psychopath that had a completely different opinion of what should be done with humanity. They looked at humanity as just cattle that needed to be removed from the earth, depopulated through the World Economic Forum policies, which they admitted to control. And that was to replace humanity with a type of reptilian hybrid that would be here. And then they would use, they'd probably keep some people around, but for slaves, but the rest of the souls would be basically, sent to the I guess you call it the intergalactic soul trade. Um, Now this time at this point, I had an Andromedan spirit guide. His name was Heelbead. He was in on it as well. I didn't realize that he wasn't mean to me or anything, but he was a liar. And part of this whole thing, I mean, once I look back and what he was really doing with me, I don't want anything to do with him. And it's I mean, I would literally have conversations. I had my entire consciousness connected with extraterrestrials for the last 15 or so years on a 24/7 type of thing. I had somebody constantly with me, but it was under AI control, and they would try to tell me things.
Mm.
The AI would cut them off, and we had that towards the end. I mean, and eventually I had a parade of ETs coming through, admitted they were able to access me under some kind of a treaty, and they would tell me, hey, you're actually a prisoner, and then they would cut them off. What they were doing is mixing other ETs in there that were highly abusive, and I think some were super soldiers, and they were telling me that I was a council member and that we were removing people that were problematic in this council hierarchy of a planetary social engineering program for humanity. And there was an Orion faction that was like a clique and was corrupt, and that we were removing these people, and that they were putting me into these interactions where I would have this interaction with the person, and it was like an abusive couple of days or a couple of hours that I'd have to be dealing with this person. So it was a way of harassing me and basically getting me to stop, because the promise was if I continued to do this, they'd let me do my project, and it was just in subconsciously I needed to do the project because I needed to wake up, but they knew that and they were trying to stop me. So this was all the way of a form of mind control and manipulation to get me to basically acquiesce and stop while they were making me sick. So anyway, when things really got bad at this point, I messed with this guy, the negotiator, and 10 hours later, he told me to F off and get out of his face. The last thing he said to me, though, because I really feel sorry for you, because I've dealt with a lot of their manipulation to the point where I know how to counter it. I give it right back to them. So I told him, I said, I feel sorry for you because you have nothing to offer me, nothing to negotiate with. You've destroyed my life. You've wrecked you've affected my son's, his life, my wife. I said, you've affected a lot of people and you're destroying lives, and you're hell bent on killing everyone. I've got nothing for you. I'm not going to do a damn thing for you. And he says, I didn't think you would anyway. And he says, because you never have before. And then that was it. And I thought to myself, what did he mean by that? So the next thing that took place is that that night is when I was sitting right at this table for hours, and I was getting hit and tortured by these reptilians. I had one that literally was attacking my ankle, and then what he did was he showed me an image of because I felt and this is going to be, if there's kids around or anybody that's squeamish or easily traumatized, is I guess you should turn this off. But I felt a needle pierce my left testicle, and it was painful. And at that point, this little Draco, a little short one, showed me an image of the needle going through the testicle, and then literally showed me an image about 15 feet from where I was laying on this table, and there was blood coming out from right between my legs, flowing onto a hospital pad. And I could see a big Draco to the right hand side. I could see those big wings with the arms up. It's like it just looks like, I guess, like a pterodactyl or something, but it's almost like a cape, but it's behind. I could see these tall Dracos and the little ones, and I could see people in lab coats, and it was the base. And yeah, and I just said, bring it on. And I stood up to them. I fought them every step of the way because I'd already been through so much pain, physical and emotional torture that I was pretty much immune to it at this point. And I knew that I had to get out of this no matter what. So nothing that they did to me was going to work, and I wasn't going to show fear because I had none. And I wasn't going to let them. Wasn't going to give an inch at all. Nothing. Um, so this went on.
Nate, just
Sorry.
let's just take a few minute break. We've
Okay.
been for an hour and 40. So
Okay. Let's get back where we were. I was talking with the. Actually, let me think here. Okay. I got done with the negotiator because we took a break for a few minutes. I lost track of where I was over the course of this evening at this point. And now this could have happened over a period of a couple of days. It's like a train wreck. It's like trying to remember every detail of a car accident that lasted for a week. So I do know that I started to burn the cords, and by the following night they were separate. Before I burned these cords off, and I completely separated myself from this AI system that they had set up, that the military sadly has access to, I was contacted by someone that sounded very, very human in the way he spoke. And I asked him, I said, "You don't sound like an ET." And he says, "I'm not." And I said, "Well, what are you and who are you?" He says, "I'm not going to give you my name, but he says, I'm a psychic super soldier, and I'm one of the ones that you talk about killing." And this was going all the way back to the spring. I think April or March or April when I did the first podcast, and I talked about not as me doing it, but as other people doing it, that there were people here being sent to take on these psychic super soldiers and these ETs and these deep underground military bases. And I referred to my friend, and I thought maybe that's what he had to do because this was already implanted in my mind as something that was going to happen. But I was questioning it. Now here I am talking to people, and I'm beginning to see that there's more to this. That this wasn't just something they were lying about. This was actually something that was real. And so here I am talking to somebody that I've literally been referring to. I mean, these are the people that were listening to me talk about this stuff. These are the ones that were putting the sound effects on my telephone, my cell phone, my landline, and doing all. And these are the people who were downloading my hard drives and then messing with a person that I talked to, just a friend that from the neighborhood, and I would talk to him about these ET subjects, and they started to mess with his computers and phones as well, and he heard the sound effects. So I'm literally talking to somebody that is now is now here to confront me, and I'm thinking, wow, okay, let's see where this goes. So I was going to try to get information from him, and he knew that. And he said to me, he says, "First off, I'll answer your questions, but you need to answer a few for me." And I said, "Okay." He says, "Who are you and what are you?" And I said, and when he said this, at this point, my higher self was able to communicate with me, and I hear her saying angelic in the background of my mind. And I didn't repeat it. I just said, in actual reference to her, I said, "I'm a Haujean woman who cares, and my AI is source." Because prior to him saying this, I asked him, "Do you have AI in you?" And he says, "Oh, absolutely." And he says, "I'm completely connected to the entire system." So then we got into a debate really after that as I started to ask questions. I asked him, I said, "So am I right about this? Are you the ones that are protecting the elites like Klaus Schwab and others? That because they can walk among us after they've done all of this to us and everything that they've done to us, and everybody knows, at least a certain segment of the population is aware of it, but nobody actually acts violently towards these people. Nobody touches them. But they'll go out and shoot up a school, or they'll go attack an innocent person, but nobody touches these people. And it's more than just a security detail. There's people with guns, it could be snipers. I don't believe it." He said, "We protect them." And he spoke very highly of Klaus Schwab. And then I said, "You know who you work for then?" I said, "You work for people who want to kill off the human race." And he says, "Population is for the great, depopulation is for the greater good," is what he said. Then we got into the discussion where he actually brought up my extraterrestrial name, my full name. He talked about the pot bus, literally, that I had referred to. He called me a no good drug dealer. And I was just, I was taken aback by this because this was not something that an extraterrestrial would say. This is something that somebody from society would say. He then showed me an image of a house. It was brand new, it was in a development, and I could see from across the street these mountains that were brown dirt, like a light brown dirt color, almost a gray, just like you'd see in the White Sands area. And I said, "What is that?" I said, "Why are you showing me a house?" And he says, "This is my new house that I just bought. This is what you get when you serve the system, and you know what you've gotten for not serving it. You've got nothing." And he basically made fun of me, the fact that they had destroyed my life and had ruined me financially, and that I was in a house that needs repairs that I was too sick to do and didn't have the money to do. It was also another tactic that the other individual had said to me too. He said, "You're living in a house that's needs work, and I can make all that change for you." It was just superficial bribes to sell out for absolutely no benefit for anybody but them. And so we're having this discussion, and then and I'm giving it back to him. I'm not just taking this. He's not intimidating me. I'm standing up to him is what was happening. At which point I started to feel. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm sort of jumping ahead here. That all happened, and then it sort of subsided. So I had this discussion, at which point, now right at the end of it, he said to me, and this is the chilling part about it, is that he goes, "I got your file right here, Nathan." And that's when he read my ET name off. And he looked at it and he says, "It says we're going to be terminating you in 14 days. He says, we're going to take you and we're going to send you back where you came from." And then he went on to tell me, he says, "We've had you in these programs." He said, "You were like an empty suit of armor," or actually he said empty shell of armor is how he described it. It's the exact words he said. And he says, "Just a killing machine. No, absolutely nothing going on in your mind but what you're supposed to do." And he said, "But you've proven to be a very manipulative, deceptive, and a very dangerous extraterrestrial, and we could not use you in any of our programs." And he says, "We're going to get rid of you, and we don't want you here." And he said, "You do not come back here and meddle in our affairs anymore," is what he said. And I said, "Why do I have 14 days?" And he says, "Because we have a treaty with your race that requires us to give them a 14-day notice before we terminate you. This has something to do with this proxy war. So even though they're fighting amongst themselves, they have agreements that apparently maintain some form of order to prevent a military interaction between them. So they fight in human bodies here on Earth, and this is how it's done. It's just a way of them taking over the pro. Now, if humanity consents to what they're doing, which is what's happened to so far, but that tide's starting to turn, then they can basically manipulate humanity to kill itself off for their benefit, and that's what they're trying to do, and rather successful at the moment. So he tells me all this, and I'm like, cool, I get to go home because I'm playing this off. And actually, at this point, at this point, I figured, okay, I'm either going to die or I'm going to live, and living like this isn't the best thing. But if I'm going to live, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to fulfill what I'm here to do. And I remembered back because 3 months prior to this, my higher self did come through, but it was under controlled conditions, and I could hear her full voice and everything. It wasn't like the inner voice that I have now. And also another ET told me the same thing. They said, in 3 months, things are going to radically change for you. And I said, what if they don't? And she said, prepare to go home immediately after that. That had to do with me separating myself from their system by destroying these cords. And if I wasn't successful during that 14 days, that I was going to be sent home. So that would be the end of this whole thing. My suffering would be over, but I'd have to live with myself, and which would be difficult because I had failed what it took me 2 lifetimes to achieve. So anyway, he tells me this, and then the next thing that happened is this ends, it stops. I go to burn the cords. I go through this process where my higher self is like a coach. And she had me make mistakes at first. And when I was trying to do, because when I looked at myself, I saw a silhouette of a man with no hair, but it was just like the energy body form of a human. And it had cords about every square inch of my body just draping off of me, coming going in every direction. It looked insane looking. I wish I could draw, because I would show people what it looked like. It was so many cords, it was unbelievable. There were small ones and there were really big ones. I had a big one in the center of my chest that was affecting my heart. I had one that was the life force cord. It was between my shoulder blades in the back that was connecting me to this altar. James Rink said that there's a cord behind your head that looks like the one that was depicted in the Matrix movies, when the the star of the movie comes out of the pod and you see it attached. But I had that, and I had all these little small ones. So what I had to do, I had to burn everything off at the same time. And it took me about an hour to do this. It was intense. I felt like a circuit. I mean, I was channeling all of the source energy and creating white hot energy that would literally disintegrate these things, and they would keep reattaching. I could see them coming out of a void and just plugging back into me. So she said, you got to burn them all at the same time. When you do that, the small ones will go first. That'll disable the machine, or the supercomputer for a short time. You'll have a brief moment, or about an hour or more, where it's not going to react anymore, because it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's overwhelmed. I have no idea. But I got to that point where the small cords were gone, and then I had to separate the one from my chest, which I succeeded in doing because they'd now been weakened, but I had to put a lot of energy into that. Finally, she said, you got to get the life force cord. And that was the hardest one. And I could see out through the back of my head in this situation. And it looked like a coaxial cable. It didn't have the needle or anything, but it was shaped like it. Just had, but it was smooth and silver. When it finally let go, it was like a spark of energy. And I had asked her, I said, well, how am I going to know if I've done it? She goes, you'll know. And I felt this surge of energy go through me as soon as it separated. Immediately, I heard this voice, Nathan, you've done a very bad thing. And then from that point, it was just off the hook, because I could see these super soldiers sitting in this room at a desk or a counter of some kind with a computer that was in the wall, and there was three of them, and I think, and like one person talking to me. And I said, how are you able to contact me like this? Are you sitting in a Montauk chair? And he says, no, we interface consciously with the computer. And he's making threats. They're going to kill me. They're going to do this and that. I'm giving it back to him. Suddenly I start feeling really sick. And I remember what my friends had described as directed energy, which I thought I was being hit with, but I wasn't. It was the corded attachments that were causing me to have rhythmic spasms and weird symptoms all over when I was getting attacked. And this was different. This was electromagnetic. And he said that, I said, what is it like? He said, your mind blanks out, you become very weak, and it looks like the air is being superheated around you. I looked around, and my eyes were like either going in and out of focus, or there was some kind of distortion around me that looked like it wasn't quite like heat coming off of a pavement, but it was similar to that. And just like a blur at the same time, but it was going in and out. And I felt really sick. And I said, and this guy's running his mouth, making threats. And I said, what is that? Is that you? And he says, yes. He said, that is me. He said, that's directed energy. How do you like it? And I said to him, at this point, I realized that, they're plugged into this. So I really wonder if they can walk the street and interface with this and attack people, because I know that they'll go through social media accounts and they'll show them something. All they have to do is look at it. It interfaces with the computer. It creates a psychic lock on the person, just like if you're remote viewing and they assign you a target. And that's how it programs the computer to have your soul energy frequency so they can attack you. So anyway, I was a smart ass, and I said, no, it's not bad. And then at that point, literally my higher self kicked in. I literally saw two arms come down in my mind's eye and literally just go from left to right and move the energy over and push it out of myself. It just pushed it into an empty space. And then it pushed it out through my head. And I was still feeling a little disoriented, but it was out. And this guy started to stutter. He's like, and I hear him saying, he's calculating, he's like 50, 60, 70, 80. He says, you just deflected 80% of that energy. And I said, yes. And I said, if you send me some more, I might be able to get and really practice at it so I can get rid of all of it. Maybe I'll send some back to you. And that's when that's when suddenly, I don't know what was said, I don't remember specifically, but it was more threats or something. But this orb flew out from my left side in my mind's eye, and it was about, maybe 2 feet wide, but it was white. It hit him directly in his face. And then more came out of me. And at this point, I hear this voice, and this is somebody different. And he's like, you just took out 3 of my personnel. You need to stop. And what it was doing is it would hit them in the face, and it would separate them from the computer and would blind them astrally. They could not see at this point. They were disoriented. They were rendered useless, just like a regular person. And it has a temporary period of time and apparently wears off. But they're panicking at this point, and they're telling me, we need to talk about this. And he says, can you just stop, please? And I'll be back in about 5 minutes. So I literally went upstairs, made a glass of iced tea, and grabbed some lunch meat or something, was eating a piece of it. He comes back and he says, let's just have a truce. We'll leave you alone and you leave us alone. And I said, I didn't believe it. I know it was bullshit. But I just said to myself, okay, yeah, I'll go along with that. I said, sure, if in a condescending way, if you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. And then he said to me, he says, I knew you had no intuition. He says, I lied to you. And I said, I know you lied to me. I said, I just wanted to see it play out. And then he left. But then from there, it was just daily. I mean, it was constant 20 plus attacks a day, energy attachments, nonstop pain. I was constantly going through it. And then I realized that I was told that you can remove it. So I started to do energy clearings and remove it. This is the first time I could do this now. But then about 2 weeks into this, it was like I had this epiphany, like, why haven't I been attacking them in response? So I started doing that, and that's what actually seriously stopped the attacks, at least for about a couple of months. There was a period, I would have some, but they were, I would strike back, and sometimes I'd follow the orb right into their face, and I'd see this little, Draco reptilian going, "Rrr," and he'd go like this, and so that's pretty much what, the way this has kind of settled down. But now it's to the point where they're trying everything that they can to stop me from talking about it. I've had a couple of Dracos come in and ask me what I plan to do when I die. And I said, the one of them was kind of funny because the last time they asked me, I said, since your hospitality has been so good and I've been treated so nice throughout my life and taken good care of, and all of my clones have been taken good care of, I'm going to come and pay you all a visit and say thank you. I just want you all to stand up and I'll just shake all of your hands. And he said, you're a liar. And I said, yes. And I said, when I come there, I said, if I don't leave with at least 3,000 kills, I'm going to be badly disappointed. And I said, you want me to hurt you right now? And he left. So it's been the way it's been. And it's kind of where I'm at right now. And I've just been what I'm trying to do is get the rest of these implants out. I've got to burn them out. I just started working on this because I've been going through a lot. I've had to try to rehab my body. 6 weeks after I severed these cords, I went and got myself tested. And 2 weeks prior to that, I was still having symptoms. They started to clear up. When I went for the test, I was testing negative, no blockages. My heart's perfect. There's nothing wrong with me, despite the sleep apnea, despite chronic pain since I was roughly around 18 is when it really got bad. And so I'm perfectly fine in that regard. And I actually felt bad because, they're doing this to me, and I'm actually utilizing resources that could have went to somebody who really needed it, but I needed it. But at the same time, I didn't. And this is the second time I've gotten tested. When I had my autonomic nervous system, that took 11 months to get tested because of the weight and, the limitations, the fact that it's rare. 3 months before, I was completely recovered from it. Not feeling perfect, but didn't have the symptoms anymore, and I followed through anyway. because you want to get that off your, because here in the U.S. you have to get it. Having a medical record is like a criminal record. They don't like to pay for things if you're sick, so you
Mm.
need to get that off of your record. And so I wanted to get completely diagnosed as being negative.
So, what can you say about their agenda and their plans for the world and for the primes and the reals?
Well, so you're interesting because you have terminology that's very uniquely your own. So I would assume the primes are, would they be people like us?
Mhm.
Okay, the reals would be real people, and then you have these other ones which I've never experienced, these AI generated entities.
Right.
I've heard of other people, but I've never had that. So I don't know much about that. But I mean, as far as the plans are, what I do know from what they told me is that they want to depopulate using the World Economic Forum on down to set these policies. The artificial austerity, the other, there's some medical programs are still not really able to talk about without having to risk something. All of that's part of a worldwide depopulation agenda. There's people that are saying that there's fewer abductions going on right now. I have no way of knowing that, but I did wake up yesterday with my higher self telling me that the reason they've decreased is because their gene stock is contaminated by a specific medical procedure and a product that's being pushed on everybody through mandates. So I'll just leave it at that.
Mhm.
So their goal is to, for what they told me, is to eliminate the human population from the planet and put their own version of a bipedal reptilian humanoid and create their own civilization here that they feel is theirs to begin with because they say it was taken from them in an ancient program that resulted in a mass extinction event with asteroids and possible nuclear weapons that killed off all the giant lizards that we had here that we find in the fossil record.
Mhm.
So this is more or less a joint program that one side is taking back or attempting to, and it's against God's will. And I will say this, and it's something I'm going to be talking about in the future, in the near future, actually, probably my next video, is that since I've separated myself from the system, I've been having source experiences, quite profound ones. Um, and it all fits in with everything that I've experienced. And one of the things that, and this is about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was driving to a hardware store and I was thinking about my situation. I was thinking about all of it, and I was kind of questioning whether I was going to go home because I was told that I've got less than a year to go, and that in November there's going to be an event that I have to take part in. And I have difficulty believing this because it's hard to comprehend something like that. How do you plan? I mean, I just have to go about my life and live it and try to make it better now that my health is improving. But so the source experience I had, I was shown incredible amounts of love. I broke down and I cried the entire drive to the store, which took 10, 15 minutes or so. And I was shown that I was going home and that my suffering would end. And that, it was just like a thank you. It was just like letting me know. It was just like, yeah, this is what's going to happen. But and from what I understand from my higher self, because this is something that came directly from my higher self, no other extra, I don't talk to ETs anymore. I know that the good ones have difficulty reaching us, and because the other ones are in control of the system. So when it happens, it's very limited. And essentially, I was told that when I die, I'm going to participate in an operation that takes down all of these beings out of these underground military bases. Not just the ones that are joint military, but the ones that they've had prior to these, to the military bases being built. It sounds crazy, but I mean, it's just that's what I've got to deal with, and that revelation is something that molds the things that I do every single day, and it's just it's hard to it's kind of hard to live with, and it is, but at the same time, it fulfills me, and it makes me it sort of calms the pain, and it actually helps me get through because I know that this life that they've destroyed isn't going to waste, and there was a purpose for it. Um, despite being a manufactured personality in a sense, because they have something that they call personality rearrangement, is what they is how they described it, and that's how they take aspects of your higher self or alters and they blend them with you. So over the course of my life, I've had everything from my sexual orientation changed to aspects of my personality. Um, and Yeah, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy at all. And I've somehow been able to manage this. And what I understood about myself is that the angelic solar nature of myself allows me to be very resilient to this type of abuse, because I've had to deal with it for a very long time. I've done things where I've been killed, I've been tortured, and this lifetime I would say is probably the hardest, because not only am I here, and my entire soul is here, but I've been put through all of these things. And there's what I understand about myself now is that I'm one of 9 alters, except for if you take my higher self as the master template of my soul, there's 9 variations of me, starting with the first one in 1947 that was killed at age 27, terminated in a Project Surrogate program, because that entity or that part of me, that individual that was me, was killed off at the time that I was born, because there was no more need. There was not a need to have that person alive at that point. I was the next, I guess you call, like a petri dish for the soul, so they can take little samples from, and that the other alters, which were 5 male and 2 female, were actually awakened by my higher self, and then they turned against their superior officers and were executed and terminated. And then this last clone, which was the one who was taken when I was 6, is the one that they used to study and contain me and to prevent me from waking up. And that's what they were using to make me sick. And they were basically realized that they had a problem on their hands, because I wasn't the only one who's done this. And they told me that. I said, "Do you think I'm going to break free?" And I told that to the super soldier, and he says, "Well, we've had a few who have gotten free, but I'm pretty confident that you're not going to be one of them." So that's what happened. And here I am, to tell the story. There's a lot more to it, and every day something literally happens almost. But my goal, as I'm here, is to to put my life back together, to get my health back together, to get some semblance of normalcy, and to to tell people and to tell them that there's a new age deception, and there's all these soul traps, and to expose what they've done to me and many other people, and to try to be there to help others, and to be somebody that they can look to and say, if he can go forward and go public under those circumstances and say the things that he said that are very deeply personal and very troubling. I mean, it's not normal that a guy would talk about having something done to his genitalia like that. It's hard to talk about, but it's easy for me in a sense, because this is therapy. This is how because there's nobody you can talk to but other people that are receptive. And I'm thankful for you and others who are doing this work, so that we can come forward and tell our story. And there's a lot more that's happened to me, and I know that the majority of it's bad. But some things are best left forgotten. I did have a recent flash of memory just a couple of days ago. I was sitting here at this desk, and I was a bit upset, and I was just wondering, and I was just thinking about everything. And suddenly I saw myself. I had a flash of memory. I'm on some kind of a cart. I'm being pushed through a dump in a big hallway. It was a huge hallway, and I'm looking straight up at the ceiling, and I can see a metal framework up there, like you'd see in a warehouse or something. And I'm looking through the part. It was like sheets or something was over me. It was like a triangular opening, just enough to let some air through. And I just gained consciousness when I looked up, and there was 2 people in lab coats next to this thing I was on. They were pushing me through the hallway. I don't know if I was a child. I probably was. I kind of sensed that, but I don't have complete. I don't have enough information. It's just more of a feeling. But I know that that was one of these abductions, and I know that I've been through hell, because I've had I had nightmares about feeling a presence in the room, trying to get out of the room, get out of bed, and you're frozen, and it feels like you cannot move. It's like this irresistible force has shut you down, and you can, and the fear is off the hook. And I would never get to see what was coming for me in these nightmares, but I knew that I knew it was real. I mean, I used to have this. I used to be afraid of a dog. I used to call it the seagull, and I remember being just crazy crying, and I was afraid of this dog, and it was the dog out of the Wizard of Oz. And then when they started that nonsense with me or telling me that I was going to do this project, they wanted me to frame it in the framework of the Wizard of Oz, like the yellow brick road is the road of ascension, the evil witch and the good witch, or the two opposing forces. The star seed is the main character. She's trying to get home. It's a dream state. It's like waking up from a engineered lifetime. And the dog was just there as a companion, but then the three characters, the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Lion, were all the people of the world were represented that had all of the power to change everything and to take control, and to to ascend, and to actually be able to control their own souls in their own world, and that they had the abilities in them, but they thought that they didn't.
Mhm.
And that was kind of the moral of the story. You have it all, you have the power within you already. But because they're very, very creative in the way that they create these scenarios and how they brainwash you. I've never seen any. I mean, if you look at the monuments of Egypt, if that's not a depiction of the level of creativity that these deceptive entities are capable of, I don't know what is, because that and everything that we see in the ancient world, the religions, and just what I've been through, I mean, extremely creative. In fact, I used to kid around with a friend who was another victim of this, and we'd shared. I still talk to her occasionally now, but she's on the verge of death. They've made her so sick. They've collapsed one of her lungs. They've raped her. They've molested her child. Her child is also in this program, and we used to joke around a little bit and saying that they're the most creative liars in the entire universe. I mean, look what they do. I mean, it's just it's one seamless. It's like the movie Phantasm. I don't know if you've ever seen that with those little silver spears, that, fork. Anyway, if you've ever seen it, there's a specific quote in there that always stuck with me. It was nothing is ever what it seems, because that was about time manipulation and affecting consciousness in multiple dimensions. And it's literally like that. I mean, you don't, it's very easy to lose touch with reality,
Mhm.
because at some point you don't know what reality is, because then when you realize that they can control it all,
Well, they
then
do
what's real,
control
what's
it.
not. Yes, they do.
It's not that they can, they do, and we're living in a theater. So, and the body
Brilliant.
has been augmented to be an interface system in a
Right.
projection system.
I call it alien stagecraft.
Yeah.
It's the big stage, and we're all in. I think, George Carlin said, he says, when you're, and this has to do with, the United States, but you could say it with the world, and we're kind of running out of time. I was going to throw this in. I guess we'll end it. But he says, I'm just going to leave it the way I would say it. When you come into the world, you get a ticket to the freak show. When you're born in the US, or actually when you're in my lab, you get a front row seat.
That's,
So,
yeah, great. Oh, I love George Carlin.
yeah.
Just want to backtrack for a second, just before we end today. And I'm just going to let everyone know that we are going to do a part two because there is so much to discuss. Uh,
Right.
but I wanted to backtrack because there was a point where you said that there were medical elements that they don't want anyone knowing about in terms of their agenda,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right? Could
Right.
you elaborate a little bit on that for everyone?
Well, I mean, without saying what it is, I mean, we've oh, there is actually a little bit more to this that I could share. If you watch the Farsight Institute, they do have a documentary of the origins of COVID-19. They show a lab explosion and so forth, meaning that the lab leak was an accident at the Wuhan lab. But I was told something, but they also show something else. One of the remote viewers showed um, a non-surface, what do they call it, a non-surface object or whatever, but it was a spacecraft. It was an extraterrestrial craft that was cloaked, that actually caused a power surge in a wall panel, which caused an explosion, and then that shattered some samples. I was told that that was actually the positive side, doing that because we're in a proxy war. It's a push and pull, and that this was something that they were working on that was going to be much, much worse, kind of like the one that was done here in the US.
Mhm.
which I cannot imagine. I get, it shows you the corruption that they could engineer that after the fact and then just go out, go public with it. Nobody says anything. Oh, okay, it's cool. Good job, guys.
Mm, mm,
And that they wanted this out because they wanted it out. It had to be released around the lab so that that connection would be made, and that it would be done in a weaker form, so that eventually, after they unrolled their Operation Lockstep, that we would get to the point where there'd be a public backlash. And it's like, why are you doing this for something that's like the flu now?
mhm,
So it exposes them. So that it forced them to show their hand, is what I understand about this. Despite the fact that the positive side released it, it was better to come out of the form it did. And I was told, I think there was 6 variants, is what I was explained in that. But yeah, that is something that they have engineered to essentially create a structure, a medical tyranny for be the foundation for a new world order, where they
mhm,
strip you of your freedoms. And you see what's going on in China. That's the model. That's the Draco model for the world. The Neuralink and the other types of technologies like that are being utilized to get us to plug into an artificial matrix where we have full digital telepathy and internet access through our brains. But it's really the way to finish us off, because at that point you can enforce thought crimes, you can stop things before they happen, and you have no freedom and no dignity. And the government will monitor your thoughts, and the elites will be exempt from it. And Klaus Schwab has sat and said these things, and it's not a conspiracy. It's a plan that they've made public, because they always make their plans public, because they know that only a small number of people are going to watch it or pay attention to it. So it's not going to affect the entire population. But then when people point it out, it becomes a conspiracy theory.
mhm.
So it's easily discredited because people are brainwashed.
Right.
They're trying to wipe us out. And so it's a push and a pull between two positive, well, one positive and negative side that are behind the scenes creating all this situation. So I guess that's the best way to explain that. But yes, that's an integral part of this, and it's something that I knew that they were going to do, but I didn't know exactly how they were going to do it. And I was always told by the positive ETs that could only say a little bit that we would stop them. I didn't know that they'd have to let most of it actually most of it all play out
Mhm.
before. But it's going to have long-lasting repercussions. It's going to affect the global population for some time. There's going to be generations that are going to be infertile, and we're going to have a lot of health problems. We already have, and we're seeing it. And I do believe within the next few years that we're going to see a positive paradigm shift, because we're seeing bits of it now happening, but it cannot actually take place into this mind control. And there's a word that I can't say because it's bad. You're not supposed to say it. I mean, it rhymes with selection. The selection control, the selection rigging that we go through every couple of years, that's all tied into this infrastructure that they've created. All of that has to be dismantled. This, directed energy systems that they're targeting people with has to be dismantled. The mind control, the remote mind control that they're capable of. And it's a transdimensional AI system, so it can reach out and affect people who have no ties, no connections to any of these programs. And of course, you have the other people that are basically reptilian, Draco souls put into human bodies. You have that stuff going on. You have people who are highly controlled, who have maybe some form of an attachment to an entity that's controlling them remotely. So
Mhm.
you have a lot of this going on. Humanity can't govern itself, not just because they're not telepathic. That's a big piece of it. But once you've taken that out of their hands, and they have 5 senses to work with, you can compartmentalize everything in programs. You can get good people to do evil things that they don't know that they're doing, and you can control everyone. And one of the things that my friend got, and her psychic download, is that they wanted television, they wanted communications, they wanted these technologies,
Right.
because they could weaponize it. There's a Farsight documentary came out November 15th about Tesla, and it goes into how he was communicating with ETs,
Mhm.
and how that was a project. And that shows there's good projects, and there's negative projects. The reason why the enemy of humanity would allow someone to become Tesla and have a group of ETs communicating this information so he could have these inventions is because the good side wanted to create a situation where the United States became the world's foremost superpower and they wanted to elevate humanity technologically. The enemy allowed it to happen without interference because they were going to use all of that to weaponize, to weaponize it and to create this new world order. So both sides had an intention. One side pulled it off, but the other side is now trying to use everything that was done with Tesla to use it against us. The advent of alternating current, all of that stuff. And a lot of that technology, of course, was shelved because that's another system. We have this corrupt system that creates artificial austerity. And that's one of the ways that they've created this realm of suffering and how they maintain control. And they have their proxies, and these rich elites are the proxies. I will give something to Alex Kohler. He's highly manipulated. I feel for the man, but he does say some truthful things. And one of the things that he said a long time ago is that, the bankers are the new priesthood. He was absolutely right about that. They are the new priesthood. They're just like it was in Egypt. They're the intermediary between these ET gods who are not gods at all, but very, very flawed beings.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
So
Well
that's
said.
it.
So, I think we have to end it here, unless
Okay.
there's something else you want to say, and then we will do a part 2.
I can just finish it off by saying reality is the creator's dream, and we are nothing but thoughts in a never-ending story. And
Well,
through a lot of work, we're going to take the pen of destiny and write our own history for once.
yeah, and we'll I think this story is going to end for sure, because this is not going to be allowed to happen and continue to happen. So there is an end to this coming, which is what the convergence of the event horizon is all about, for
Mhm.
final liberation and emancipation. So that is on the horizon for sure, but still have to endure, because we are just stepping into the deeper element of this all as
Yeah.
it's being exposed. So
We're no longer on the event horizon. We're actually going in the black pit right now. We've just went over the edge, and we're in free fall right now, waiting to hit bottom, and
yeah,
then hoping we can pick ourselves back up from it.
yeah,
I absolutely agree.
well said. So it's been a real pleasure, and we're all looking forward to having you back on. Hopefully it won't be too long, so that everyone won't have to wait, and we'll get that going.
Well, thank you, Lotta. Thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone who's watching when this does come out. I really, really appreciate the support. And I just want to say that you're not like the rest, and that's a good thing. So don't change.
Yeah, I think that has been the issue my whole life. Is that I don't.
Yeah, right. That is the issue because you don't fit in. You're a square peg in a round hole. I feel the same way. I've never felt like I've really fit in, and I've always been at odds with everything that I've seen. It's just this world needs help.
Mm. I liken us to kung fu, right? We walk
Hmm.
on the periphery, and we weave in and out of people's lives and things, but we are on the exterior,
Right.
going in when needed.
Yeah.
So, with that, thank you everyone for being here, and we'll all see you real soon.
Take care, guys. Thank you.